Okay, traders, today we're going to be covering a very, very important topic when we talk about trading psychology and the psychology in general. And this is very much a taboo. Not many people discuss it. Not many people know how to discuss it. And I'm going to share some insights in today's video that may just be very beneficial for you throughout your journey, as I know it's been for mine and for many of my students and clients. Now, it goes without saying that if you're currently in a state of being very depressed or having suicidal thoughts or anything like that, to immediately consult a professional, someone that's trusted and someone that can help you go through it. This video is going to frame more as something that you wouldn't necessarily watch or implement if you're currently highly depressed or in suicidal thoughts. That can be quite difficult to work through by yourself. So definitely contact someone that's trusted. But if you are wanting to put in preventative measures, or your depression or the suicidal thoughts come and go and they're slightly more minor and you feel quite confident to be able to work through the charges yourself, then this video is going to offer you an excellent model to be able to do that. And it's going to give you some insights and some tools and some understandings that are going to help you work through it. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. There's a lot to discuss and I want to share some ideas. And by the way, if you're finding these videos useful, make sure you share them with your trading communities, especially this one, because this is one that's not really talked about. And if you haven't already, make sure you check out the Trading Psychology Quiz, Game Changer. All right, let's get into it. Now, the first topic or understanding I would love to share, I'm going to work through each of these emotions, is giving you an understanding of the importance of these emotions. I mean, some go without saying, but there are also a few sneaky ones here, especially guilt and shame. Guilt and shame very commonly keep people poor and keep people giving or spending money without ever feeling worthy of holding on to it. It becomes more of a self-worth thing. So a lot of traders don't recognize they have guilt and shame logged in their mind, and that could be impacting their ability to hold on to money, because deep down they have this feeling of not being worthy of making money, not being worthy of consistently making money and holding on to large amounts of money. So this is something that needs to be addressed as a trader. And I'm going to draw a little diagram here to explain this topic and this concept, where you've probably seen this diagram before. You've got negative, you've got positive, you've got the future, which is also your imagination, and you've got the past, which is also your memory. And in this center point here, this is a state of being truly present with the here and now. And this is the authentic you, the true you. And that's the state in the center here: presence, authentic you, the true you. And what can happen throughout your life is you can go through life and you can think that you've caused more pain than pleasure to people in the past, and you think you've challenged people more than you've supported them, and hurt people more than you've benefited them, and caused them more negative than positive. And you can log these charges, states of guilt and shame in your mind, and these guilts and shames can sort of cluster together in your mind, and you can have this charge logged in your memory of the perception of causing other individuals more negative than benefit, more drawback than pain. It can also be towards yourself. So you can have a guilt, a shame, and an embarrassment, whatever you want to call it, logged in the past. Now, these guilts and shames logged in the past, these charges here, there is an altruistic compensation to these charges. And what that means is that with the accumulation of guilt and shame in the past, you then have this compensation into the future where you want to provide more benefit than drawback to other individuals. It's compensating for the guilts and shames of the past. And we can call this altruism. And typically altruism is labeled as this good thing that everybody should do in society. But the truth is, if you understand the underlying compensation of altruism, and this is guilt and shame logged in the past, and what many traders do, they have this guilt and shame logged in the past, and then the moment they make money or they start to build momentum financially, they don't feel worthy of holding on to it, and they feel like they have to squander it and give it away. And sometimes they spend it, sometimes they give it, sometimes they go and rescue people when they have this money. because of this altruistic compensation, because of this logged guilt and shame of the past. Okay? Now, an extreme case of guilt and shame, so if we take this guilt and shame and we exaggerate it and we accentuate it and we exaggerate the charges in our mind, and we keep running the story about how bad that us doing that thing was and how terrible of a person we are, whatever story you may be creating in your head, and if we exaggerate and accentuate that, then what we can have is, we can have an extreme case of altruism taken to an extreme, right? And an extreme altruism taken to an extreme is suicide. It's the sacrifice of yourself for other people or whatever. The extreme case of altruism is self-sacrifice, suicide. And so there's a few important ideas to consider here. Firstly, guilt and shame logged is going to stop you from building wealth as a trader. So, as traders, that's enough of a consequence to ensure you go in there and address that part of your psyche. But also, if you continue to exaggerate it and you have these large charges that you don't address, then that guilt and shame taken to an extreme can have extreme altruistic actions such as suicide. And really, suicide is this feeling of this deep unworthiness and this lack of self-worth here that is logged and exaggerated and accentuated until you then perceive more advantage than disadvantage to killing yourself than you do staying alive, and you feel like you're a burden to other people. You feel unworthy of having anything or that type of stuff. And these are charges that need to be addressed, otherwise they could lead to suicide. Now, one thing I mentioned here is that there's this idea where your story dictates how you feel, or rather the emotion you have. If you consistently run a story in your mind and you continue to exaggerate that story, and it's a biased story, maybe you're aware of the drawbacks and you're unaware of the benefits, and you keep exaggerating how bad a certain action was that someone did to you or you did to someone else, and you continue to run that story and you continue to have confirmation bias to support why that story is terrible and you're evil, they're evil, then guess what? You're not going to change the emotion in that moment. And in fact, you're going to exaggerate that emotion. So it's very important to not run a biased story and to rather stop yourself and hold yourself accountable to see the other side of situations. And it's very important that if you're aware that you're running a certain story or you have a certain belief and you continue to run this idea or this belief or this story in your mind, then it's very important to stop yourself, because running the story is not going to do anything for you, and it's just going to exaggerate the story. It's going to exaggerate the emotion. You're only going to feel worse. So it's important to stop the story and learn to, in a sense, redefine the story by expanding your awareness in certain moments. And it's about broadening your perspective or awareness of certain moments. And guess what? When you do, the emotion's no longer there. And you can take something, and it typically happens throughout your life over a long period of time. Let's say, for example, you're dating someone, and initially you only see the advantages of that person. You're highly infatuated with them. Over time, it takes a long period of time for you to start to see some of the drawbacks and some of the risks and some of the consequences of dating this individual. So what happens is this positive emotion gets equilibrated over a long period of time eventually, right? Also, too, you can go through a very painful breakup and be resentful to this individual. And then 3 to 5 years later, maybe you found someone else that's more compatible for you. Maybe you're married, you have kids now, and it takes you 3 to 5 years to see the benefits. So you can go through that period in time, and over time, you can start to see some of the benefits. Or you can stop running the story, and you can hold yourself accountable to start to see some of the other side of that story and some of the benefits of that story, if it's a resentful story, or some of the drawbacks if it's an infatuated story. And by stopping running the story and holding yourself accountable to see the other side, you start to address the emotional component. You broaden your perspective on the situation. You're more aware in that situation. You're less emotional. You see it more objectively. Okay, so it's very important not to run a story, but to rather stop the stories and learn to see the other side. Hold yourself accountable to see the other side of the story. So with a guilt or a shame logged there, it's an indication that you're aware of the drawbacks in that moment, you're conscious of the drawbacks, and you're unconscious of the benefits. Okay? So one of the best questions to ask yourself, if you're feeling guilty over a certain action, I know I've worked with many, many clients who have guilt logged early in their life, especially around family, especially around money. Maybe they've perceived to have lost a lot of money or lost other people's money or to have hurt other individuals. It's important to go in there and find, not to make up, not to justify your actions, but to find the benefits in that moment to the individuals you perceive to have hurt. Now, the benefits are there, but you're unaware of them because of that confirmation bias, that survival instinct that we've been talking about throughout this series. So it's important to hold yourself accountable to see the benefits to those individuals. And sometimes we get caught in society, and there's this ideal of how you should be or how you should act to other individuals, and you should treat everybody kindly, and you should be nice to everybody. It's a bit of a fantasy, though. Human nature encompasses both nice and mean qualities, kind and cruel qualities. So if your values are challenged in certain situations, you're going to be mean, you're going to be cruel. If your values are supported, you're going to be nice, you're going to be nice to other individuals. So it's also important not to compare yourself to some of these social idealisms that are a little bit hypocritical and nobody can live up to. And really the people who promote them the most are the ones who've broken them the most. And it's really that guilt and shame that lead them to promote those ideas more. So be aware sometimes of these one-sided expectations you put on yourself or society tries to impose of you on how you should be. Because if you get caught up in that and you think there's something wrong with you because you don't live up to this one-sided positive idea that society promotes, then well, you're going to have a lot of guilt throughout your life. But the truth is human beings have two sides to themselves. They've got a positive side that when they're supported, they exhibit, they're supportive, they're positive, they're happy when your values are supported. And when your values are challenged, you tend to be a bit of an asshole, really. And if you're challenged, you close down and you're mean to individuals, and it's just a normal response. So don't get caught up in this hypocritical idea that you have to be one-sided because it's not real. Okay? So be aware of your guilt and shame, and if you perceive to have let other people down in the past, go back to those moments, and maybe you were mean to someone. I had a client who stole some money from their sister when they were very young, and we went back and we had a look in that moment, and we had a look, how did that serve their sister in that moment? And the truth is, their sister was vulnerable in that situation because they weren't protecting their money or keeping their money safe. So they taught their sister a very valuable lesson that, you have to protect the things that are valuable to you. You have to keep money safe and out of vulnerable situations where people can take from you. So when they had that realization, they realized, oh shit, I did take from them, but I also gave to them a very valuable lesson that's going to serve them for life. So it's not about justifying your actions and making things up. It's about going back to specific moments and broadening your perspective. And one of the best questions you can ask is, all right, this moment I perceive to have hurt another individual, hurt myself. If I perceive to have hurt another individual, what were the benefits to them? And if I perceive to have hurt myself, have a shame, what are the benefits to me in that moment? So you can start to work at broadening your perspective over that charge. Another thing here, a lot of people hold on to this feeling of guilt and shame over a certain action towards another individual. Maybe you perceive to have let another individual down, and you're assuming that person's hurt by that thing. Sometimes people move on, and sometimes people have different perspectives. So you holding on to that guilt, it really does you no justice over a long period of time. Okay? Now, this by no means that you should go out and do things that are intentionally harmful to other people and just justify your actions. In fact, I don't promote that one bit. I promote this idea that you should aim to be respectful and treat other people with respect. But it's also important to understand the underlying dynamic and not get caught into this idea that you have to be one-sided all the time. People are going to challenge you. People are going to probe you and push you. You're going to have a side that comes off that's a little bit more mean and a little bit more challenging. Okay. Now, so make sure you go in there and you become aware of the guilt and shame, because that can be leading to you not holding on to money over a long period of time. And you go in there and address any charges. If you need help with that, I talk extensively about this in the 12-week program. I have the tools, I have all the coaching and all that type of stuff in there. And if you have any questions on this, make sure you comment them in the comments below, so I can answer those questions, or I can clarify anything that I may have overlooked. So that's guilt and shame. It's important to address those, and it's important to go in there and broaden your perspective so you can start to work at some of the charges there. All right. The other component here is the suicide. It's important to recognize that suicide tends to come from this feeling of unworthiness and this deep logged guilt and shame. And again, if you're having suicidal thoughts and that type of stuff, go in there and have a professional there work with you. But remember, the more you continue to run the story about this and you don't actually go in there and you see the other side of that and you don't address that, then you're not going to stop feeling the way you feel and running that emotion, because the story that you run in your mind and the perception you have directly relates to the emotion that you experience and the feeling you have in that moment. So continue to run the same story, you're going to continue to have the same emotion. If you want to change the emotion, you have to start to redefine the story. The way you redefine the story is by going back to the specific moments and asking quality questions to see the other side of that event so you can broaden your perspective. And when you do, you shrink the emotion. The broader the perspective, the lower the emotion. Okay, it's very important to understand. So make sure you go in there and you address the guilts and shames, because I guarantee they're having an effect on your trading, whether you want them to or not. Now, the last little component here is depression. So there are a lot of traders who are depressed, and the reason they're depressed is because they have this idea in their mind or this fantasy about how they wish their life was. And in their mind, they're associating this idea of like having a car, having a nice house, having a watch, having certain profits and certain financial goals. And they're only seeing the benefits of these. And in their mind, this is all benefit, all pleasure. And what's happening, because their current life doesn't meet up to these things, they don't have the car yet, they don't have the house, they don't have the profit, they've only created these ideas in their mind, they have all these benefits associated to them, then their life right now, their current life, is depressing relative to that fantasy, because they don't have all those things. And if they don't have all those things, guess what they have? They have pain, they have drawback, they've got all negative, right? Because they don't have all these things that they create in their mind. So if you go to the moment you're having a depression, you can find that in your mind at that exact moment, you're having a story in your mind about what you wish you had, which is the fantasy, which is all the benefits and all the positives. And because your life doesn't have that right now, you're running a depression. So if you go to the moment you're depressed, I guarantee you in your mind, the exact opposite fantasy is there. And that's what's leading to the depression. And again, the story in your mind is what leads to the emotion you have. So you need to learn to redefine the story. And the way you get rid of the depression and you start to address the depression, chip at it, is by going in there and finding, all right, in that moment of depression, it takes a level of self-awareness that many people either don't want to have or struggle to have. But if you go back to the specific moment in your mind, what is it you wished you had in that moment, or what are you comparing your life to? And you'll see that there are these positive fantasies of something that you wished you had. You want to go in there and find the drawbacks to those. What are the drawbacks of the cars? What are the drawbacks of the houses and the profits? And you want to start to see the other side of this story. And when you do, you take that goal off the pedestal, that fantasy off the pedestal, and you start to find some of the benefits of your current life, which will be the opposite to these drawbacks. And you realize, oh, you know what? My life isn't all that bad after all. I only thought it was bad because I thought my fantasy in my mind was all good. But when you start to find the drawbacks of having the car and the maintenance and the insurance and the security threats and the difficulty park and the safety and all those issues, and with the house, with a nice apartment, the same things, and the upkeep and the costs and the drawbacks of having the financial profits from the market, and you go in there and you see the other side of those things, then guess what? You broaden your perspective of the fantasies, you take that off the pedestal, and you start to find the benefits of your current reality, and then you can start to appreciate your life a little bit more. You can appreciate what you have, because if you're constantly comparing what you have to something you wished you had, an all positive fantasy, you can't appreciate what you currently have. So it's very, very important to go in there and address that. Okay, so hopefully this gave you some clearer ideas on guilt, shame, suicide, and depression, and gave you some ideas to work with, gave you some understandings that will be useful in your journey, so at least you can understand what's going on in your mind. Again, any questions, drop them in the comments. If you found this useful, please share this video with your trading communities. And if you haven't already, make sure you do the trading psychology quiz. That quiz is going to show you which of the 4 trading mindsets you have, as well as give you a free personalized report to help you get from where you are to consistently paid by the markets. All right, thanks for watching to the end, and I look forward to seeing each of you tomorrow.